Okay, so we'll see if the light works. That's a little off, but anyway, so this is a meditation, and this was like, so I do guided meditation. And guided meditation, whenever you do meditation, you have things that you see or sense, and so I can interpret those as well. So I do guided meditation, okay? And so like for businesses as well and stuff. So this is a long guided meditation, and this person saw like a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna read it out, okay? So first he sees this frog sitting in a lily pad on the water, and he's just chewing on something. Then he zooms in on the water, and it ended up being an ocean, and then an ocean of the earth with the frog still sitting on it. Then there was this giant frog sitting on the earth nonchalantly. Huge shoes and pants come up, and the frog jumps off the earth, and the person who was this person, right, became this person. So then it jumped off the earth, and then a person who was the person that's doing the meditation bent down to pick up the earth as if it were marble and put it in their pocket. He kept walking, staring up at the sun, looking for shapes in the cloud, and the frog was still hopping next to him. Then he zoomed back in on the frog, and he hopped into a puddle and reverted back to a tadpole. Very interesting. Oh, a raven came and picked up the tadpole and flew away with it. The raven landed on a scarecrow that loomed high in the middle of a cornfield. Strong winds started blowing, and the raven flew away, and all the straw was blown away from the scarecrow. It flew on the wind and landed in the water ocean. They saw the horizon in the sky and the sun setting across the horizon. The sun never set, though. It was frozen in place with red, yellow, and orange rays through the sky. Dark storm clouds started to gather, and then they drifted over the cornfield from before. It started raining, and the rest of the scarecrow was washed away. On the ground, a bunch of little frogs came out of it and took pieces of fabric and took them back to their burrows to help keep them cool and moist for when the sun came back up. The corn started to grow larger and larger, and eventually they split apart and became sunflowers. The sunflowers followed the sun as it passed overhead. When it was night, they simply dipped down as if waiting, but never closed. Each time following the sun, as the days passed, the forest began to grow around in the sunflowers, and it was dark. It was a dark forest, not dark scary, but dark overgrowth. And the sunflowers stopped following the sun and started looking into the forest as they were searching for something. And then they felt like that the person also felt like they were looking for something, but they but couldn't tell what they were looking for. And I think they turned into a sunflower, who knows? And then they was leaning forward trying to look for the forest, but not sure what they were looking for. Okay, so this is a huge, like, it's so much symbolism, okay? So let's start going. So first you see like the frog is sitting on a lily pad, right? And then he's just sitting there, sort of like chewing. So the frog is just sort of sitting there. Frogs are usually good omens, and they sort of, I think it's also fertility. Let me check. So I think the frogs are good omens and fertility. Let me check this really quick. It's not fertility, it's a transformation, okay? Because they transform from a tadpole to a frog, and it's like a huge transformation, right? It's a tadpole. First they don't have feetsies, or legs, and now they don't have feetsies, but that's what I call them. And then they have legs, okay? So it's also symbolic of growth and and transformation, okay? So that also for me, a frog is like the prince, right? So, the prince is hexed, right? And then he turns into a frog, and it is through seeing through the princess's eyes of truly wanting a wish and seeing the beauty in the frog, right? That she sort of kisses them or something like that, right? Trusting it or something like that. I forget what the little thing is. So it's about the frog turning into a prince as well. Okay. Also, the lily pad sort of is symbolic of possibly like the lotus, right? The lotuses sort of look like lily pads. So it's about coming out of something that was very muddy and emotional, and also transformation of enlightenment and awakening, okay, that this person has had. So the frog is symbolic of the enlightenment and the awakening and the transformation that possibly he is having, okay, or that's happening in his life. And then the ocean is emotions, right? It's also subconscious and unconsciousness, so subconsciousness, so it's also having to do with emotions and an enlightenment and a transformation and an understanding of the emotions, okay, that he has. And then he sees the earth from afar and he sort of picks it up. He becomes like, so I don't know if the frog, he's the one that turns into, he doesn't turn into the frog. So he sort of merges in and has, hold on, give me a minute. Huge shoes and pants came up, okay? So the shoes are symbolic of moving forward. It's also that he has big shoes that he has to fill, okay? Sort of like galaxy, right? Because it's sort of like the earth and he can see the earth, okay? And also pants, in Spanish, it's like, te pones tus pantalones, like you are very, you sort of like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but sort of like you man up, okay, is sort of what it means. So you sort of put in your pants, right? When they say like put, one leg in the pant and the other. I don't know. You guys mentioned what that is, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So it's about him filling big shoes and manning up to the responsibility that he has, or an awakening, subconscious awakening that he is having, okay? And so he picks up the earth and puts it in his pocket. So he's got this, okay? He's got this. And then he keeps on walking, so that's progression. And then he sees the sun and he's looking for different shapes. So he's trying to find meaning, right? And then the frog is right next to him. So that's also, consistent transformation that the frog is there. And then he zooms back in, and then they step into a puddle, and then the frog reverts back to a tadpole. So there's something that has to do with his awakening or his subconscious, or possibly some emotion that he reverted, that he went back and he regressed, because you have a frog and then later he becomes a tadpole. So that's a regression because he had already become a frog, okay? So he regressed in some possibly emotional or awakening or subconscious thing that he went through. And then the raven came in and picked up the tadpole. Ravens are messengers. They're also transformation, okay, because they sort of represent some sort of death. They're also, messengers from the underworld, okay? So there can be a death, physical death, that maybe someone passed away, or it's a huge transformation that he is going through, okay? It's also Edgar Allan Poe, right? The Raven, and if I remember correctly, like he goes and visits him, and it's about death and possibly like a spirit or like a subconscious or something like that. I forget what it is. So that is symbolic. And so then he, so he picks up the tadpole and flies away with it. And then the raven landed on a scarecrow. Scarecrow is sort of, it's sort of an imaginary person, right? It's an illusion of a person, so that way they can scare off the crows, okay? So very interesting. So, I hadn't picked that up. Okay, so, the scarecrow that loomed high in the middle. Strong wind started blowing. It also is indicative of a false friendship, okay? And it's also indicative of something not being tangible and not being legitimate. Like it's not material. It's something that's just, not with substance, okay? It also is like a caregiver or caretaker of like the cornfields, right? So that way predators won't come in, but it's only an illusion. So possibly trying to ward off predators. And the raven here is sort of like a predator, and he lands on the scarecrow. that loomed in the middle of the cornfield. Strong wind started blowing, and the raven flew away, and the straw was blown away from the scarecrow. So when they come, right, he's in the middle of the cornfield. Cornfields represent abundance. They represent, it's wheat. They represent nourishment. They represent, symbolic of material, right? Like an abundance. Okay, so then it's the wind. So there's going to be a change of wind in his life. Okay, that has to do with his nourishment. And this possible transformation, but also probably some material gains of some sort. Okay, and then he obviously there's either transformation or there's a predator that he feels like it's a friend or someone that's been exposed of some sort. Okay, and then he sees the horizon and the sun setting, but then the sun never sets. So it's a new dawn that's coming. I think it's a new dawn. So it's a new era because it's going down, but it never really goes down. So it's still there, right? But it's sort of like an ending of a cycle. And then he sees red, yellow, and orange. So those are your chakras, your red chakra, your yellow, and your orange chakra. So red is about root and about rooting things down and grounding them. And it's also talks about, material things and grounding. The orange and the yellow are, I always get them mixed up, so please forgive me for you guys that know what your chakras are. So one of them is the sacral chakra and the other one is the solar plexus. One of them is wisdom and power, and the other one is sexuality and intimacy. And so all those three have to do with your bottom chakra, the ones up on top, right, starting from the heart, the throat, the core, the third eye, and then the crown chakra are all about spirituality and about a different level. So he's grounding first and foremost the most basic chakras, which are the first three, and it's the root chakra, the sacral, and the solar plexus. So he's grounding that in this new cycle that he's finishing off, but also starting, because every time there's an ending, there is a new beginning. And then so there's a dark storm clouds that started to gather as they drift over the cornfield from before. So there's something that he's going through that is, kind of dark and kind of negative, that has finished off the cycle. Okay. And then it started to rain. So there's some cleansing that came through after this cycle is being done. So he's at the end of a cycle and he's cleansing. It also might mean that he's, sad, and that there's some, there's been some crying about this. I'm so sorry about the lighting. Anyway, I must look kind of weird. Anyway, so then a bunch of little frogs came out and took pieces of fabric and went back to the burrows to keep them. So out of this darkness came abundance, right? And they multiplied. So there was a multiplication like an amplification and a multiplying of possibly these good omens, or these frogs that are basically good omens. Okay. And they're starting to weave it back in the burrows, which is something that he's planted. Okay. To keep them clean. And then the sun came up and then the corn started to grow larger. So there's abundance coming in. It's something that he's been nurturing and something that's he's been growing. And then they sort of split apart and become sunflowers. Sunflowers represent Leo and zodiac sign. It also represents the sun. Okay, so he also, and then the sunflowers follow the sun and passed over the head. When it was night, they simply dipped down and waiting, but never closed. So there is an abundance that's coming that they're waiting for. Okay, and they also are following the happiness. And so the forest began to grow. So that means that there's an abundance growing. It can also mean that there might be, like, you can't see in the forest, so there might be something that he can't see forth, right? And so the forest is sort of like overgrown. But nonetheless, he's a sunflower, or he has sunflowers, and so he's being guided by light, and he's being guided by happiness, and he's being guided by the sun. It can also mean that he is guiding people, because he's sort of like in a star status, because the sun represents the star. Is a star, right? The sun is a star, and then so the sunflowers represent the sun as well. Okay. And then, they were sort of searching for something. So he himself is also searching for something, but he's not quite sure what he's looking for. Okay, so very, very long meditation. It really wasn't that long. It was 10 minutes, but this is all that he saw, and there was a lot of symbolism to it. So that's it. Namaste. Love and light. Chip.